Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. Let's go ahead and get into section 2. So, Portugal is going to gain footholds. That's really the big thing we're talking about today. It's just like Portugal and their interactions in Africa. They begin by setting up small forts all around the coast in order to collect food, water, and various supplies that they're going to need as they, continue exploring. Um, They're going to trade directly with their sources in Africa to avoid the middlemen of this all. And they're really just going to go through and take whatever they can and trade muskets, tools, and cloth, basically for gold, ivory, hides, and slaves. That's the big thing that they are trading for. Now, the Portuguese are even going to attack African trading cities like Mombasa and Malindi. These are hubs of international trade with the goal to get rid of the Arab populations. The slave trade, and I'm going to try and move myself in a spot where I'm not blocking something. So, in the 1500s to 1600s, slaves were viewed as the most important good that was traded. Portuguese traders joined this profitable slave trade, followed by many Europeans. They'll exchange European goods for slaves. Europeans will then use slaves to perform labor on their large estates, aka plantations. Some will be used as household servants, and during the 1500s, Europeans were encouraging a much broader slave trade than they had been before. Really, the big thing to keep in mind here is this is the beginning of that slave trade that you kind of already are familiar with from U.S. history last year. Slaves would be traded for textiles, metalwork, rum, tobacco, weapons, gunpowder, and over the next 300 years, the slave trade exploded into a large, profitable business. Every year, thousands of slaves would be shipped across the Atlantic to work on sugar, rice, and tobacco plantations as well. Some African leaders are going to want to stop the slave trading, but the supporters were just too strong. One of the people that tried to stop this was Affonso I, the ruler of the Congo. He was tutored by Portuguese missionaries. Again, a missionary is a person who wants to convert others to a religion. And he was against the idea of the slave trade in general. He appealed to Europeans, namely the Portuguese, to stop the slave trade. Well, they didn't. He wanted to convert Africans to Christianity, thinking, well, if we did this, they're not going to take us into slavery. And that isn't going to stop them. As more and more slaves were traded, some kingdoms became quite small. However, other kingdoms emerged who depended on the slave trade. These states would wage war on the smaller African states and sell those people into slavery. One such example is the Asante Kingdom, which has owned land in what is now, in present-day Ghana, ruled by Osei Tutu, a powerful king and military leader. Again, they would attack their neighbors and sell them off into slavery so their own people weren't being sold off. A little bit more on the Asantes. Tutu claimed his right to rule came from heaven. That's the idea of divine right. And he was trying to unify his kingdom in order to fight off other states. They eventually will run a monopoly on gold, mining, and the slave trade in Africa. Again, a monopoly is exclusive control of a business or industry, and this allowed them to build a wealthy and powerful kingdom. Now, that being said, eventually they will also be sold off into slavery as well, but not yet. Then we also have the Oyo Empire. This is settled by the Yoruba people of present-day Nigeria. They began as a relatively small forest kingdom, and leaders are going to use their wealth from the slave trade to build an army and conquer the neighboring kingdom of Dahomey and continued wealth by trade with European merchants at Porto Novo. Like, legitimate, they make bank off of selling people into slavery. So, switching gears a little bit, several European countries followed Portugal's idea of trading posts in Africa. The British, the Dutch, and the French are all going to do this and open up ports in Africa when Portuguese power declined, which is about the 1600s. In 1652, Dutch farmers known as the Boers are going to settle Cape Town, South Africa. This becomes the first permanent European settlement in Africa, and over time they're going to oust and enslave the native South Africans and conduct violence against other African groups in the region. Just to say, this is the beginning of that period of colonization in Africa. By the mid-1600s, both the British and French had reached present-day Senegal, and the French are going to establish a fort around 1700. And in 1788, the British will establish the African Association, or an organization that sponsored explorers going into Africa. And this is going to lead to a massive explosion of European exploration of Africa and, well, more claiming it for these European powers. All right, that is it for notes for today. There is no new assignment today, so I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.